essentially test you in domains, buckets, if we want to use simple words, right? And so they test we start out by testing your intelligence. We always have to have what we call a benchmark. So we test your intelligence, and we test your intelligence in 4 domains. We test your speed of processing, we test your language skills, your math skills, and to some degree we test your memory, your ability to retain and output information. And then we get a percentile or a measure that then compares you to children your age. Now, the problem is, there is no norms, right? Children in the West Indies have not been tested using these batteries. So we're actually comparing them to children in England and in the US. So that's the number one problem.
Okay.
If you're pretty good at what you do, you know how to adjust those measures and really appreciate what's in front of you. So I'll give you a good example. And Juanita Brathwaite, if you guys have any interaction with her, she's excellent at this. First batch of, set of children that I tested, there was a question about what do you call the whiskers on a cat? And you show them a picture, and the child's supposed to point to the object that you want them to name. It's a naming task. And the child said, it's its beard. And for a minute there, I'm like, well, there's no beard answer in this book. And then I had a judgment call. Because what are the whiskers? They're facial hair, right? And what does the child call facial hair?
Beard.
The beard. And that's when we started to realize that we desperately need to, one, understand our population as a unique population in terms of the children and their language and their assessment. And then we also realized that we needed to be able to appreciate that they needed to be tested and compared to their own societal norms. So
Definitely.
that's where the basis of intelligence and understanding the brain matters. So after completing my 3 years and honestly getting burnt out, because at that time there were only 2 psychologists in the Ministry of Education, and maybe about 4 of us on the island in private practice, and then I started to have to travel to other islands to help other islands out who had nothing at all, to Lucia, Dominica. I then decided that it was time to go back to the US and started my second master's in cognitive neuroscience. So that's now drilling down more into the brain. So I went back to Columbia, did a second master's in cognitive neuroscience, fell in love with attention deficit disorder, which I did a lot of that testing here too, primarily in partnership with Dr. Suping Chow. You guys are familiar with her? She is a phenomenal, she might be retired now, but phenomenal pediatrician. She's not retired. God, she promised me she would retire soon. Phenomenal pediatrician on the island. Partnered with her and ran clinic out of her office, did a lot of attention deficit testing. What I did when I returned to school is I also entered into research. So a lot of the information that I'm giving you today is coming out of me having a research background in psychology. So I became a coordinator for a service chief. A service chief is a head of department for child and adolescent psychiatry. And we then started the process of scanning children's brains in what we call a functional imaging resonance machine. So we put them in a scanner, and that machine measures brain activity across the entire brain, and it lights up like a Christmas tree, and then you figure out exactly what parts are being activated. So that's pretty exciting, right?
Yep.
Watching that happen. We're actually going to go through some of that today. So these are the foundations from which I come. That essentially is what I've been up to for the last maybe decade, maybe 2 decades and a half. But why does this matter to me? Because essentially what it did for me as a parent, as I mentioned, a 15 and a 19-year-old, who are both equally intelligent, who are definitely coming up in this information age and are very tech savvy, and also live across cultures, Barbados and in the US. And for us in the US, maybe not so much in Barbados, but we are definitely dealing with very strong racial tensions right now in the US, and communication is very important. Awareness is very important. Self-awareness and attention is very important. So I after this kind of journey of exposure, fell in love with just how the minds of children works. And so what's my goal today? My goal is to share in the most layman way. You'll see a lot of diagrams, you'll see a lot of images, the most layman way, what I know. You don't need to know at this point all of the book knowledge that I had to learn that stuff for the people who let me out of school. You don't need to know it, but you need to know how to apply it. You need to be able to, starting with your own children, and then God is going to grace you with other children. And trust me, I have tons of godchildren. Kazi will tell you, I'm probably in the 20s right now. Because you cannot let a child pass you by and see them working, activated, moving, being inspired, and not stop and go, God, what are you doing here? And ask the question. So you start out as an inquisitive parent who starts asking God about your own child, and then you become an inquisitive neighbor, and you serve your neighbor, you serve your community with the same level of interest and passion that you do your own children. And this is how we arrive at appropriate interventions, appropriate strategies, and we ensure that we protect our next generation and our culture.
Amen.
Right, so that's it in a nutshell. One last thing I do want to add. Current work that I'm doing right now is on gun violence. So there is a huge, I'm struggling to find the right word, maybe just presence at this point of all different forms of gun violence. So suicide by gun, suicide by gun or by gunfire is number one in terms of the statistics. However, followed by that there's domestic violence, and now we know that there's a huge rush, of violence in schools where there's random shooters, and now children have random shooter protocol in schools. And then for us who live in the cities, there's gang violence. So Chicago, obviously, we know is one of the number one places. I work, as of October, I've been working in Newark, which is also it's like number 2 in the country as well in terms of deaths by gun violence. So we are working, and that's more in the clinical standpoint, we are working on behavior modification strategies with young men. And we're also tying that into a spiritual component of them just being spiritually aware that their lives have value, and that they can start to make sensible decisions when faced with confrontation. But a lot of the behaviors that they manifest is very intricately mixed into the brain and behavior. Attention, focus, response time. All of those things are things that they struggle with, and it leads to them making poor decisions and poor management of themselves, and then ultimately for many of them losing their lives. So that was a lot. I'm having to check my time.